Thank you. How was that?
Could you tell?
So, yeah, I mean, that is basically the experience that you had of knowing what you care about and sharing what you care about. That's a principle of the feminine. It's connectedness. It's what we care about. It's a feminine strength to be in touch with what you care about. It gives you so much of the why of why you do things.
So since so many of you are familiar with the original edition of the book, we thought we'd start by focusing a little bit on the new chapter, which is the last one, and then we'll work backwards and talk about some of the original co-creative powers. But since Wendy and I are both mothers of sons, and when my son was born, I figured this was my best chance ever to see the world through the eyes of a guy. Yeah. Like, I now had a boy. This was great. I'm wondering how adopting Chase influenced the book and your work. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, if I can without crying. Let's see. Right along the time when we were developing the content for the men's course, it's called Inclusive Leadership, Men as Allies. It really coincided with this thing that changed my life, where my sister, who was sick, she lost custody of Chase many times. She lived on the East Coast. It looked like to me that there was a likelihood that I would need to step in some way. And it did happen right along the time that we were developing the content. I think it was right along the time that my book got published, honestly. And it really, I grew up with 4 sisters, so I didn't even know much about how boys work. I had no plans to raise a child. I had no preparation, but I had a few friends who, in my life, that I had seen do that. I have a friend in the room right now who took on a kid and raised a boy, and you know who you are. Barbara. And it inspired me. It inspired me that people could do that. And I never really thought I would get a chance to be a mother. I never really had that as a goal. But it was kind of a miraculous thing that happened. And I ended up with him and he ended up with me. And that was 10 years ago and he's 22 now. But what I did learn about that really informed it, and what made me have a personal commitment to men, is guys are suffering from the patriarchy just like we are. And they're in different ways. They're in what's called the man box. And the man box, we call that, as if you think about it, it's like, what are men deprived of in the human qualities because things look feminine and they get stamped out of them. And I watched, my kid came to me kind of baked. He was 10 already when I got him. So I saw already some things that were built into him that I wouldn't have wanted to cultivate in him. But it was my job. The one thing I knew was my job was to keep his pilot light lit. And what I meant by that, when I thought about it, was he was really a feeling kid. He had a lot of feelings, and he maintained those feelings even though he had been through a lot of loss already and kind of hardship. And so I really got a personal experience of what it's like for kids and for boys and for men to not to be able to have the full spectrum of human qualities appreciated and developed in them. And so the commitment that we have and the work that we do is, our approach is very blame-free, and very much focused on the fact that we need the guys to have whole selves, just like women want to have their whole self. That's an important part of the work that we do. But having said that, I will also say, there are more men named Michael or James than there are women leaders in corporate America. So let's look at the facts here. We've got 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs that are men. 76% of C-suite executives are men. We're a long way from reaching parity here. And they say at the rate that we're going to get to pay, gender parity and be paid equally is 300 years.
No, that's depressing.
Yeah,
this is why we need everybody to read the book. Yes. Okay, so just to tease you a little bit more, there's like 60 pages in this chapter, and it is full of personal assessments and hypothetical scenarios and concrete suggestions and tips for what you can do and what you can share with the men in your lives. So Wendy calls it an evolution to evolve, which I think is very nice. I call
invitation.
Invitation, excuse me. I call it a must read. So
yeah, it is. So if you, it looks like we have more women than men in the course, but thank you, men, for coming. And so you need to give this to all your guy friends, this section of the book anyway. There are 3 things that we focus on that come from not only our research in companies, but the research that has been accumulated through places like Lean In and McKinsey, et cetera. And those 3 complaints or issues that women experience are in 3 buckets. They feel dismissed, excluded, and that they have to prove themselves over and over again. Does that resonate to anybody in the room? Yeah, and so women, for the most part, aren't listened to, they aren't believed, they're likely to be interrupted, they're likely to have their ideas stolen, and to be talked over. These are real things. And this isn't because men are bad. If you think about, a lot of guys are brought up with competitive sports backgrounds. They're used to like stealing the ball from the other guy and running down the field, and then that guy steals it from the other one and they run down the field. In a meeting, they might do that same behavior. And women, we're trained to include everyone, to be polite, to make sure that all the voices are heard, take our turn. Those are the things we're conditioned to do. So you put these two together, and then you have this situation that's not fair. And so we don't come from that we got to fix the guys because they're bad, but rather we've got to make them first aware of this situation and help them understand some of the context and slow them down enough so that they, men are really trained to drive and get into action. And we don't want them to run into action. We don't want them to be a hero. We want them to slow down enough to educate themselves about the landscape in meetings, for instance, and with women, and to get curious about how they could interact in a way that's inclusive.
So it's about curiosity and compassion. It's not a rescue mission.
Exactly.
As you said, right? Okay.
Not a rescue mission.
Okay, so as we think about the 5 co-creative powers, so we've got energy, mind, feeling, speech, and action. I might have gotten them out of order, but that's right. Basically it, right? Okay. Is there one that's more important than the others for men versus women? Because that's a lot.
Yeah. How many of you have read the book, just so I know? There's a lot. There is one that's more important for men, and that is the feelings one. One of the things we work on in the course, and I don't think it's so spelled out in the chapter, but it's about EQ and it's about becoming literate. There's this thing called, there's a TED Talk we show by JoeEhrman he's this ex-football big guy who's a motivational speaker now, and he talks about this thing called alexithymia, which is supposedly in most men, and it's the inability to put feelings into words. And he talks about the myth of manhood and how wrong we have it and how wrong men have it. And he kind of he deconstructs it, and then he talks about really what it is to be a man in the real way. And he talks about relationship. But alexithymia, not being able to a lot of us have that probably, not being able to put our feelings into words, but men in particular have, I guess Brene Brown did a study of 7,000 people and asked them what were the feelings that they could name. And they came up with happy, sad, and pissed off. That was it. So there's a lot more in that lexicon, and so teaching men just what are their feelings and what are their needs it's a really important thing.
When I think about the book and the different powers that spoke most to me, I think energy was the one that you and I worked on initially when you were coaching me. Would you describe the energy audit to everyone else? Because I think that that's a really powerful tool for both men and women.
Yeah. I'll talk about energy, but I think you should talk about the energy audit. Do you want to talk about how it was for you? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, yes, I vividly remember. Because she sat me down one day and she said, okay, I want you to open up a notebook, and on the left-hand side, you're going to write down all the things that drain you. All the people, places, activities, colors, foods, everything that drains you. And on the right-hand side, you're going to write down everything that fills you up, that gives you joy. And it didn't take long. Words just came spilling out, and I stood back and I looked at those two pieces of paper, and I knew exactly what I needed to do in terms of changing my career. That's what actually led me to make a really big change, moving from a marketing organization into a teaching organization. So that, it still gives me goosebumps to talk about it, but just really being able to put that down on paper was transformational.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, everybody can do that on their own. It's a great little exercise. I like to think about the energy, the co-creative power of energy, as both something that you emit and something that you can look for to follow what is next for you. So you are constantly emitting a vibe, and that is very contagious. That's why they say you become the 3 people that you most hang around with, right? You're constantly emitting a countenance that is you. And often we're not very deliberate about that. And we're kind of like in a mood, or we're whatever we're bringing to it. But if you're a leader, you better believe that that's important, what you're generating. And then also, you know, we want to think about when you want to know what you should do next, or where you should go next, think about what has energy for you. What lights you up? If something, like you said, the energy audit is the perfect way, because if you're doing something that every time you do it, you're like dreading it, then you don't want to go that way. You want to, and even if it's something small, like I'm going to take a nap, and then after the nap, something else will occur to you. You know, I'm going to take a walk, or I'm going to, whatever it is, follow those little things that light you up, and those are your yellow brick road.
And sometimes it's even a major expenditure of energy that fills you back up. Like teaching a class for me, I feel like I can teach a 4-hour class and I'm on a high when I walk out of that room, because that's what I love to do.
It was amazing to watch you do that, to change your life like that, and to find something that gives you so much passion.
So talk a little bit about the inner vow, that whole process of creating what I think of as a personal purpose statement. Because I suspect that your inner vow changed a bit as you became a mom, right? And we've already touched on that, but come back around.
Can I get to that? How are we doing on time? We okay? Yeah. Let me talk a little bit about the co-creative power of mind, which is the inner vow comes in, and I'll address that. So the co-creative power of mind, we all know what it's like to spiral down, right? You know, it's kind of like we all know what it's like to have that little gremlin on our shoulder who says, like, how am I doing? Am I okay? Am I safe? Am I as good as that other person? You know, constantly making little commentary about things. And RickHanson, the neuropsychologist, talks about how, you know, our mind is like, the mind to negativity is like a 4-lane highway, and the mind to positivity and peace is like a dirt road in the jungle. So our minds, you know, are prone to these things of negativity. That's kind of like the soup that we swim in. It's not personal. You know, that's one of the things that most of the women get out of the courses that we take. They're like, oh, everyone does this? You know, it's kind of nice to find out that it's not personal, and then you can step back from it some.
Well, it's sort of a survival instinct. I mean, we are primed to look for what's dangerous and respond to it so that we stay alive, right?
Absolutely.
That's where it comes from.
Absolutely. Okay. So the amygdala, which is our, you know, the thing that keeps an eye on something that might put us into danger, constantly, obsessively scanning the environment for things that might go wrong. It's kind of like it pulls an alarm cord and sends these flood of hormones that are stimulating to our bodies and minds when to keep us safe, But as you know, it's our brains haven't evolved as quickly as our world has, and we're not being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, and you've heard all that. Here's something that I found out recently that just blew my mind, which ties to what you're saying, it's that the amygdala also has another purpose. And what it is that it shifts from being on the lookout for danger to, once it gets what's called a belonging cue. This ties to my whole thing about relationship and connectedness. Once it gets a belonging cue, which is like the feeling that someone's listening to you, or someone says yes, or in a meeting that you get somebody that just you feel like is on your side, that belonging cue will switch that amygdala from being in a fear mode to looking for the friends that you have, for tracking the people that are in your tribe, for finding out what they're up to and making sure that you stay really connected to them. The way DanielCoyle said it was, he said that it switches, let me see if I have that quote somewhere here. Yeah, he goes, that's from the CultureCode book, DanielCoyle. He says that it uses immense and conscious neural horsepower to build and sustain social bonds. It tracks members in your group and sets the stage for meaningful engagement. In a heartbeat, DanielCoyle says it transforms from a growling guard dog into an energetic guide dog with a single-minded goal to make sure you stay tightly connected with your people. So that is really interesting that the mind is set up that way. This really, proves my point in some ways. But back to the inner vow, one of the things that we do in the course and in the book is we talk about 3 ways that you can work with your mind. Let's see if I can. I thought I had a tissue here. Oh, here it is. What you attend to, what you intend, and how you interpret experiences. What you attend to is what you give attention to becomes your life. What is on the altar of your life? What you intend is the inner vow. The inner vow is just a tool to be intentional about who you want to be in the world and how you want to show up and how you want to leave people and the effect you want to have. So it gets you to be, it's like an alignment tool for your higher self. So even when you feel like you're in a mood or you're having a reaction, you remember, my inner vow, I'm going to be that. So that's intention. And then interpret is how you're interpreting your story. You can never be bigger than your story about yourself. So whatever story you're making up in the moment and whatever meaning you're making up, we are meaning-making machines. That's how we work. So make up something that's going to serve you. And that's really the thing.
I mean, I teach all these classes on leadership and management and stuff, and when she said to me, you're the leader of your own life. How are you going to lead your life? I was like, oh. It's like that. When people used to say, I don't want to be a human doing, I want to be a human being. But when she asked me about leading my own life in the frame of leadership, it just really took me back. And I think the inner vow is like my North Star. That sort of thing. It's really helpful to remind yourself every day. I mean, when we first started working together, you practically had me write it on my mirror in my bathroom in lipstick so that I could read it every morning.
What is your inner vow?
I'm not going to repeat it for everybody here. But I just encourage you all to really think about it because it is a centering principle. It really is. We should probably take some questions from the audience too, because I think people are brimming.
Anybody have an inner vow they want to share?
There we go.
Give us some examples of inner vows.
Okay.
What they look like.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll do mine. Okay. My old one, when I first made this up, I actually started this 30 years ago with some girlfriends that were all consultants, and we had gone to a wheatgrass juice retreat, and we were at the airport. And we were leaving after the whole thing. We did colonics, and oh my God, the thing was
TMI. Okay, keep going.
TMI. And so we were saying, and they said, well, let's make up words that we're going to be. Let's get our inner vows, And they didn't call it that, but so we all made up these words. And I was living in a little studio apartment in downtown Larkspur, and I made up some really big words. Mine were extraordinary, influential, magnanimous, and I think fun. That was the 4th one. And that year, believe it or not, out of my little studio apartment, I got interviewed by Fortune magazine. I got asked to be a champion of hope for the National Kidney Foundation, where I had to raise money, magnanimous. I had 5 tables of people, and then influential, and extraordinary, because I was being honored as a champion of hope. But all these things happened that year that, in fact, when I got up to talk at the thing with the doctor who was being honored, he and I were joking and being playful, so we got to be fun too. So I think that when you have an alignment tool like that, you kind of know what to say yes to. You attract certain things. You know, I don't want to say it's magic, but I think it really helps you stay on the course of the direction that you want to go.
Yeah, it helps you focus and make decisions, for sure.
But little side note, Ben, who's in the room and leads the men's course with me next to the other leader of the men's course, asked me one time, or maybe it was somebody in the course, the last time, the men's course, and they said, well, do you ever change your inner vow? Like, does it ever evolve? And I said, well, yeah, my new inner vow is that I'm sexy, loose, and free.
I love that.
So that went over well.
Yeah, they really perked up at that.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's totally. Other questions for Wendy? Yes, go ahead. We have a microphone if that is necessary.
So I'm so appreciative of your book and your work, and I am also a therapist and an executive coach, and I lead groups teaching BreneBrown's Dare Lead work. And what I'm finding is the young people, including my own daughters, are wrought with fear and a really cruel inner bully. And I am effectively teaching tools, along with other fabulous therapists in this room actually, to help our girls, especially boys too when I get a chance, but help our girls retrain their thinking to learn and know that they're 100% responsible for the thoughts that they think. And I'm wondering how we get your body of work spiraling up, right, for all of us, but how do we start to spiral, not down, because I don't believe in that, but how do we get it to a younger audience? How do we do that collectively? I mean, I'm doing what I can do, but I think it's a worthy conversation about how we make spiral up groups for girls on the way to college.
Yeah.
And how alcohol isn't the spiral up. It's our thinking, and it's their writing, and I don't know if I made sense.
No, that totally makes sense. No, thank you for expressing your mission in a way, or something that you really care about.
My inner vow.
Yeah, your inner vow, because it's something that I've thought about before, and I remember myself as a teenager. So I was lost, and I didn't have anybody to help me, and I would love to do that. I just I've been busy doing what I'm doing, so I haven't gotten there yet. But I love the idea, and would be happy to talk more about it.
And book clubs are taking off, right?
That's right. Book clubs. That's another way that they could start independently using these tools and have community, because the book was really written for groups together. It works so well when you have someone to talk about what you're going through, and otherwise you just don't do the exercises probably.
Right. The power is often in the peer coaching. I mean, with the guidance of someone who's been trained in the material, but then to have people coach each other at a peer level really makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
I saw another hand.
Through the exercises, like I know for me, even just being in the room tonight, I'm like, oh yeah, I was doing something today that was kind of draining my energy, and I'm like, okay, how do I remember to move there? Even though I teach these things for you. So the exercises in the book too are easy and fun, and they're in like cute little boxes, and they're very like bite-sized and chunkable. So I think book club is really a great idea because it's super easy to process through the exercises.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And one
thank
step
you.
at a time. One thing you always say is you don't have to have the next 5 years figured out. You just need to know what you're doing next.
That's
right?
so true. It's so
Yeah.
true. It's just as, like Anne Lamott says, you know, I can only see as far as my headlights in the fog. That's okay. You just have to see just enough ahead to do the next right thing. You don't have to know what the long-term thing is. Anybody else have a question? Yes. Oh, who? I think, yeah. There she is. Hi.
Hi. So I've had the opposite experience, which is I'm super grateful that I've worked in male-dominated places for 20 years and more, and I've had amazing mentors that have taught me how to play like a man and win. And I just can't imagine how they would see feelings as valuable. And so I'm curious, as when you're teaching the dude course, if you ever get any resistance from the men about the feelings, and how you explain to them that there is actually value to the feelings, and then like what is that value?
Thank you. We, it's one part of the course, and the part that, and why they get interested in it is we talk about communication, and we hear from the guys that they actually kind of back away from charged conversations with women sometimes. I'm happy for you that you've been so lucky that you've been mentored, because mentorship and sponsorship is the key for what women need in organizations. And it's amazing, and it's great that you've had such a, so much support that way. But often men, especially after MeToo, tend to, instead of step forward in connecting with women, step back. And they're hesitant. We hear this all the time, that they're less likely to shut the door when they're meeting with a woman. They're less likely to go on a trip with a woman. There's less likely, things that we need the most from the men right now, they tend to be safe. They want to play it safe. They don't want to be accused of impropriety. So I would say that they get interested in that feelings conversation when we can tie it to things that are happening every day for them, where they're having conflict, but they don't deal with it, they just back away. That's what gets them interested. Who else has a question? Any question is fine. Yes.
I've just started reading the book this
Thank you.
week, so I'm just catching up on some of these ideas.
Thank you.
The energy stuff the other night. I wanted to ask you a question about coaching inside large businesses, and if you're seeing any differences in the questions or issues that women of different generations are facing. And what I mean by that, if you look at the coaching you might have done 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and then also any intergenerational differences at this point in time.
Okay. I think I would answer that to say, first of all, yeah, there is a difference. The younger people are eager to, they're very vocal about how they want things to be and how much wholeness they want, instead of giving their whole lives over. They don't have the model of working your ass off until you get to retirement and then doing what you want to do later. That's kind of what it was for my generation, or maybe a little older than me. But so then they have the younger people. You would probably be able to speak to this too, really, if you think there's a difference in the generations. And then in terms of coaching, you mean like how would we coach them differently?
Are they asking different questions, 10 years ago versus now, and then at this same point in time between generations, are they asking different questions?
I think the main one is, the main part that's different that I noticed besides what I just said is just that a lot of the way I talked about the work in the book is in the binary of the feminine and the masculine, and they're not having any of that. So even though I'm talking about archetypes of the feminine and the masculine, it's uncomfortable and unacceptable for the younger generations, really, because they are so fluid and so non-binary that sometimes that concept can't really be worked with them because of that. That's the only thing I run into. Otherwise, they're the same kind of people. Everybody has the same issues.
Right behind her, another question.
Yes, hi.
I loved everything you said, and I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to limit myself to one. I have 3 boys, 5 and below, and so I'd love to hear. I know, it's a nice night out.
Yeah, it's great.
About, just what you talked about with really cultivating the feminine and, giving them a language to talk about what they're feeling. What do you feel, and I will read the book downstairs after this, but because I haven't read it yet, so I don't know if this is in the book, so I don't mean to ask something repetitive, but, if it's in there, but would love to hear you talk a little bit about, your own experience and through your teachings and your coursework, what do you think has worked well for cultivating really a sense of empathy? And, I think that's my biggest concern with raising. Bringing more white men into this world is just like making them empathetic and cognizant of other people's experiences around them. And that, especially in the bubble that we live in here, it's not, I don't know, so I'd love to hear you talk about, like, what do you think?
Wow.
What works well, and, anything you want to say is helpful.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And wow, great that you're here. Congratulations on getting a night out. It's amazing. Well, empathy is such a big part of the work that we do, and it comes easier to women than men. But we notice that when we get the men in touch with the women that we actually generate from the women in the course things that they'd like to have the men stop doing, start doing, and continue to do. And those things are all in this book, what we hear them say. And what we find is that it's much more effective when they can hear things directly from their colleagues, and that they develop empathy right away. So your boys, if they have female friends that will tell them things that will help them to develop that natural empathy in themselves. But also, I think kids really copy their parents, right? I mean, no matter what I've ever told Chase, he'll be more like me than what I told him to do. So I had to change. I had to get better really quick. One time he said to me, I'll never forget this. We got into a screaming match and we were yelling at each other. And he said to me, "Whatever you send to me, I'm going to send right back to you." And I went, "Oh my God, yeah, that's what happens." I mean, I can talk more about the book or anything, but if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. It's great to hear from you. Yes, Sally, hi.
Hi, my name is Sally. I've read the first book. Can't wait to read the second book to see what's different.
Okay.
I want to know what you're thinking about and curious about next. In your work, in communication, or in the larger world. What's on your mind?
Wow, that's a good question, yeah. Should we do this one?
And probably our last one, because you have a little musical performance you want to give before we head downstairs at 7. So that's a heck of a question to end on.
Yeah. That's all right. Did you have anything else to say about that? Okay. Okay. Well, what I think about is how to have more fun. I mean, that's something that I think about. I also think about making a difference with the work that I have. It's really important to me. This is a body of work that, I took 10 years to write this book originally. So it's so well thought out, because I went over it and what about this, what about that? I'm a synthesizer rather than like an original thinker, I think. But it has so many good things in it that I believe in, and now with the chunk for men, it has both these things that are important to me. That and then fun. So one of the ways that I have fun is I just talk about following energy. I have to say this. I noticed that I was watching all these documentaries of women singers, like Pink and J-Lo and Billie Eilish and all those really great, music documentaries. And then soon after that, I got working with my friend Scott, who's here tonight. He's a musician, Scott Ferretter, a wonderful musician. And he started helping me do songs, and because I've always been a singer in the background, like just for fun.
In the shower.
In the shower, yeah. And at my 50th birthday party, I did a big performance at the Sweetwater. But what I wanted to do was just play with music more, play with it more, And so I started doing that with him, and the next thing you know, I got invited to be a backup singer in a Bob Seger tribute band. So I'm kind of doing that right now. I mean, in my spare time. We haven't completely gelled yet as a group, but it seems like we are, and it's kind of fun. So that happened, and then Scott said to me, "You can write a song," and I'm like, "No, I can't." And he goes, "Yes, you can," and so. He convinced me that I could, and I did write this song, and I never thought I would be singing it publicly, but I'm going to sing it, even though it's my very first song ever.